Check.
Oh, Doug's not here yet.
No.
Oh, we gotta wait.
Can we start with something that doesn't require Doug?
Is Michael not coming?
No, he said housing. He said main office. Probably trying to get him out of there.
Oh,
Here's
sit
Doug.
in.
Doug just texted. 10 minutes late.
Okay.
Well, 2 minutes before we get
Do you
started.
want to wait a few minutes?
Can we have a
Oh, we gotta wait for Doug in.
Why don't you-
presentation?
Why don't you just make an announcement that we're holding on for board council to arrive.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will be starting a little bit late. We're waiting on a couple more people to come in. There's one.
No, the board council.
And our board council, we need to wait for him to be here. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Finance Committee meeting. Please note this meeting will be recorded in its entirety. I'll begin by conducting Commissioner roll call. Chair Gabriel Lopez.
Here.
Vice Chair Gilbert Casillas.
Present.
Barbara Unkama Burford.
Okay.
Dalia Contreras. Estrellita Garcia Diaz. Janet Garcia. Leela Powell.
Here.
Doug Ponick, Board of Commissioners Attorney.
I'm here.
Acting President and CEO Michael Reyes.
Here.
The time is 1:08 p.m. You may call the meeting to order.
Oh, you're first. It's the Finance Committee.
Oh, yes, sorry. It's my first time chairing this committee, so in the absence of our Finance Committee Chair, I'm going to call our Finance Committee meeting to order. And our first item,
Excellent.
let me do the reading of it. There we go. All right. There's a script. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and the Board of Commissioners or committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate, litigation, personnel, and security matters. The board or committee reserves the right to enter into a closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Before we get to all that, we're going to do citizens to be heard. And we have a list of citizens to be heard who signed
This
up.
is in operations. So.
That's for operations. Do we have any citizens to be heard for the Finance Committee?
Citizens signed up to speak. Please note that now is the time for citizens to be heard.
No.
Citizens will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Each citizen will be permitted to speak only once.
That will be during the operations meeting. Do we have any for finance?
Yes.
Wait,
Is that this
All right.
list?
is that this list?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Excellent. Well then, Susan Baldwin. And are we inviting folks to come and speak at the podium? All right. So what's the process if someone signed up and they're not? Can we put them later on in the list?
Yeah, why don't we just come back to them at the end of the list?
Okay. All right, then Linda Washington.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Yes, one of my concerns was my lease. It expired last year, December 31st, and I have yet to be able to sign my lease. Capstone was over this property before Beacon Corporation was, so they did not send me out a notice or anything. My certification is not till 2026. So when I talked to Beacon Corporation, they keep telling me they're going to call me next week, or they're going to call me, but I haven't yet to be able to sign my lease. And also I have been experiencing smells of marijuana in my apartment, and I don't smoke. So those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Washington. And I also should note, I know we have a little script again for me to read, but the board is directed not to respond to comments. Maybe Doug, you could explain
Yeah,
that a little better than I
The law
can.
permits the board to hear your comments at this time, but it
Okay.
doesn't permit the board to engage in a back and forth. So
Got it.
they've noted your comments, and I'm
Okay.
sure there are staff here that can meet with you while we're
Okay.
in session.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia Brannon.
Hello. I don't really have a problem, but yes, I do have a problem. I turned in work order about a month or so ago. There's cracks in my walls. My front doorknob is loose. They came and took a picture of it, but nothing's been done since. The apartment upstairs over me is a vacant apartment, but during the night, I hear bumping around, moving around, and we got homeless people living out there under the tree, and I just don't feel safe. Someone set the alarm off last night, early this morning, and it scared me half to death, as I'm sure it scared other people too. we're fighting a losing battle here. I love my apartment, but to get things done in a timely manner, now I know y'all are working on it, but it's got to get better. Thank you.
Thank you. Wanda Campbell?
Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon.
My concerns are not having places for the citizens to sit when we have medical appointments and these large dogs. And I've been here for like 13 years, and there is no place for us to have parties or to engage with our friends and family. And I don't know, they need to do something about these large dogs. And we have homeless people running in and out of the halls. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Lori Fuller. Can we adjust the mic for her? She's in the kitchen. Tim, can you adjust?
Can someone get her a mic, please?
My very concern is for our community and some respect for where we live. I worked very hard at a women's shelter for 3 months to find a home, and I finally found it. And I get up every day and I see trash everywhere around our community, in our elevators, in our halls. And I believe that our managers are doing what they can to pick up after ourselves. But that is wrong. Okay, I know that there are transients that are gonna come through and disrespect us and try to trash our community, but we don't have to be a part of that. If you see something that needs to be picked up and put in the trash, I smoke, but I spent $7 at Walmart to get a pot that I could put my cigarette butts in. I don't just flick them out in the world expecting somebody else to pick up. And it's really disturbing to me that people have to come after you, not residents. I'm not accusing anybody, but this is our home. I mean, I worked really hard to get here. And I would like for somebody to just, all of us, not somebody, but all of us to step up. And, you know, it only takes a minute to reach down. Even from a wheelchair, it's harder from a walker. I'll give you that. Oh my gosh, I've been there. It's a lot harder. Oh, falling on my damn face from a walker, but you know, at least whatever effort you can make to bring cleanliness and respect to our home. I would appreciate that. And really, that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fuller. Thank you. Cynthia Monroe?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I have a problem with homeless people. I have a vacant apartment above me and one below me. And I know I'm not crazy. I know when somebody's walking around. The office I've been to, they went to check. I give them credit for that, but they went on the office time. These people come in there 7, 8, 9 o'clock. I smell marijuana coming through my vents. It's all over my clothes. I've been complaining about that. I had mold, because I've been flooded out twice. And they came and they cleaned that out. And when Capstone was here, it was so bad I had to sleep in my car. They stole my catalytic converter off my car. They took 2 handles off of my car. That's money that I didn't have. It's just that I'm fed up. And I love my apartment, I really do. But for me to wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and that smell is coming down on me. And I have CHS, COPD, breathing problem. And it's just hard. I'm having problems right now. And so all of this needs to be addressed. The home, they just taking over. They just taking over. We used to just sit out. We can't do that. Boy, get dark. We watching our watch. Okay, we see y'all later. It's sad. It is pathetic. It really is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Monroe. Heidi Williams?
Good afternoon.
I've been here since 2021, I'm sorry. And I have had problems ever since I've been here with someone coming into my apartment unannounced, unknown, and there's no forced entry, so it has to be someone that's living here on the property that have taken items from my apartment unauthorized. I mean, I'm just fed up. This has been going on for years. I pay my rent on time, have never been late, never. And I mean, it is just unbelievable. And I am fed up with it. And I know who the person is, and I will disclose the name of the person privately, but it doesn't make no sense that I have to live uncomfortable in my place. You're supposed to be living safe in your place, and I live uncomfortable, nervous, not knowing what's going to happen next. And thank God no one has ever come in while I was there. But I'm just fed up. I'm sick of it. I don't know what to do. It doesn't make any sense. And that is all. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Catherine Mood.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
I'm gonna take this mask off so you all can hear me. I have several concerns. My first concern is seniors here. There's seniors here, there's people with disabilities, and we're unable to have a safe place to sit when we're waiting on transportation for our appointments. We have to stand in the hall, or we have to stand in the office area. Also, I have a ring at my door. Wee hours of the morning, I'm seeing people, my ring is going off, dinging constantly. We're seeing people walking through the hall with backpacks, so you know what that is. They're sleeping somewhere on this property. Also, the maintenance guys, I don't understand why we have to wait until someone comes to our apartment to bring us a filter. I have to wait 4 days for a filter. Why do I have to wait that long when you can give it to me out of the door of the office? Everything is locked here. We have no access to the weight room, the community room, the game room upstairs. The library is a mess. This wasn't like this when Capstone had this property. It has been going down. I have been here, it'll be 10 years next month. I still do not have an update on my recertification. I'm still waiting on that. So I don't know what's going on, but overall, I like the apartment. It's roomy, it's spacious, but we need more work done, especially with the filtering. There's a lot of dust. So I go to the office, I ask them about getting someone to clean the air ducts. They come in and they put a duct grate up in my bathroom and that's it. But the dust is still, it's everywhere. You constantly clean it. As a senior, we don't have the energy to do that constantly. Every other day, we having a dust to get that out. Why don't we have someone to clean these ducts? I don't understand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is Susan Baldwin here? Susan Baldwin from Cottage Creek Apartments. Can we take her in the next meeting
If you wish, I don't know how she signed up for this meeting, but was she present for that?
She registered online in advance of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's your discretion if you wish to do that.
All right.
That's okay.
Let's go ahead and conclude the citizens to be heard and move on to our items. I want to let you know that we do we have a translator with us today? Yes, we do have a translator with us today for those who need translation. We've already done the citizens to be heard and our roll call, so we can move on to discussion items. We have an update and discussion regarding the quarterly financial report, and I want to remind folks that this is the Finance Committee meeting of the Board of Commissioners. And our presenter is Aaron Sladek, the Director of Finance and Accounting. Aaron, I know we do this every time. Is it Sladek? Sladek. Could you change the spelling so it's easier for me? Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'm going to be presenting the financial update for the 3 months ended September 30th, 2024. I do want to open this by stating that we did shift around the income statements a little bit. So we're still going to be presenting, as we have in the past couple of years, we separated our operations from our capital activities. So you'll observe that this report expanded quite a bit because we're presenting this by line of business now. So on this first page here, you'll see our core housing activities of public housing, Section 8, and Beacon. And then on the following page, it will continue on to our central office cost center, which is the management arm for our federal housing programs, and then our community development initiatives department, which is charged with providing resident services. So we still have the total there for operations, which I'm going to refer to the totals as well. I just wanted to put this out there, the transparency overall. And while the primary purpose of this report is really to compare actual results to budget, we felt it, really imperative, rather because of several periods. So rather than just the budget results, we compared the actual to actual results for the first quarter. So that would be September 30th, 2023 to the 3 months ended September 30th, 2024. And I'm pleased to share that net operating income did show an improvement, a significant improvement, with public housing increasing by 1.3 million for those first 3 months of the year, and Beacon increasing by 2.3 million. And this positive trend was largely due to reductions in maintenance and repair costs, as well as an increase in tenant revenue. Diane and I have also examined the October financials, and we are still trending in a positive direction. So moving into the actual to budget comparison for the period, the operations segment achieved a surplus for non-cash items of 5.6.
Can you, thank you.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Go ahead.
As I was saying, the operations segment achieved a surplus.
I'd like to make a comment for just a moment, though, relevant to the financials. We've been hearing that there are some maintenance needs here. What you're telling us is that we may have more revenue in order to apply to maintenance needs?
That is correct.
That's correct. So with increased tenant revenue across our different properties, we may be able to increase upkeep and address some of the concerns that residents have brought to our attention today.
That is correct.
Thank you. I think that's relevant.
So the operations segment achieved a surplus of 5.6 million. This was 5.4 million above the budgeted surplus. However, we did have to utilize some MTW funds that are factored into that surplus. So 1.5 million was allocated towards public housing operating expenses. 5.7 million was used for Beacon debt repayment, and 0.6 million was utilized for community development initiatives. And remaining MTW funds were used for development costs related to 100 labor, Snowden, as well as pre-development for Lincoln. Moving on to revenue performance. Operating revenue for operations segment was approximately $547,000 below budget. Tenant revenue underperformed by 1.5 million. This was mainly due to lower occupancy rates in the Beacon portfolio, which ranged from 52 to 74%. This was below the portfolio average of 82%. Beacon's economic occupancy, which is a measure of actual income collected as a percentage of budget revenue, was close to physical occupancy, was also around 82%. Grant revenue exceeded budget by $691,000. This was driven primarily by increased Section 8 administrative fees, including an additional $180,000 in VASH fees, along with a $326,000 adjustment to Housing Choice Voucher Program funding. So throughout the year, HUD will review and they'll make adjustments based on the most current information they have. So sometimes early in the first quarter of the year, we will see adjustments like this that kind of throw us off our budget slightly. Public housing as well was a little bit over budget because we saw a progression of 98.8% compared to our 96% budgeted level. Moving to expenses, operating expenses we're still in the operations segment. We were 3.5 million below budget. Salaries and benefits was 1.3 million under budget due to effective staffing management. Maintenance and repairs was $880,000 below budget, with $914,000 of savings in public housing driven by lower unit make-ready costs, maintenance supplies, and HVAC and plumbing repairs. Other expenses, there were savings of 1.4 million, including $895,000 in technology and licensing fees, and $739,000 in office-related expenses. This was partially offset. We can move on to the next. This is our capital activities. So again, this is just our real estate services and capital funds lines of business separated out now. Capital segment reported a surplus of 6.6 million, which was 1.2 million above budget. Total operating revenue was essentially flat. We saw a slight positive variance there, 49,000. On the expenses side, we were $421,000 below budget. Salaries and benefits exceeded budget by about 197,000, primarily due to higher administrative salaries and real estate services, and other expenses came in favorable 611,000 under budget. And this was due to consulting fees, but we do expect for consulting fees to catch up later in the fiscal year. And next, moving to the balance sheet. So total increased by 23.4 million, or about 4%. The categories here, current assets decreased by 7.4 million, mainly due to cash outflows for insurance premiums, accounts payable, and partnership operating costs. Fixed assets increased by approximately 14.6 million. This was driven by a 68.9 million increase in buildings and site improvements from Beacon acquisitions and the rehabilitation of Victoria Plaza. This was partially offset by routine depreciation and a decrease in construction in progress. And here under assets, non-current assets, this increased by 16.2 million. This was mainly due to 9.7 million in MTW loan advances to the Snowden Partnership, as well as 4.3 million in loans from the Facility Corporation to the Petrenko and Josephine LLCs. And we also saw an increase of 2.4 million in development fees. Again, that's an increase in the development fee receivable, and that may not be collected for a long period. 10 to 15. They have essentially 15 years to pay those fees off.
Good, you're good.
Moving to total liabilities and deferred inflows of resources, this category increased by 2.7 million, or 1.24%. This increase was largely due to a reclassification of the Converse Ranch 2 debt. So per accounting standards, at the end of the fiscal year, if that debt is maturing within 12 years, you have to reclass that from a non-current liability to a current liability. So as a side note, that debt is currently in the refinance process. We're pending a HUD review or approval, rather, to move forward with that, and we will close on that refinance with Frost Bank hopefully next month. And then the leased assets category, that increased by 4.8 million due to so total net position, that's the last category, that increased by 20.7 million, or 5.72%. And this increase was due to effective management of expenses and revenue and organization for success for the remaining periods in the fiscal year. And now we're going to move to some graphs. So the first table, this is a budget to actual for both 9/30/2024 versus 9/30/2023. Operating revenue was approximately 2.3% higher compared to the previous year, and this was mainly due to higher tenant revenue. That difference there of 2.7 million versus 10.4 was mainly due to some acquisitions that we've made, including Midcrown, San Juan, and the Alhambra in the last 12 months. And moving to operating expenses, we saw an increase of 2.6%, from 55.9 million, from 54.5 million to 55.9 million. So that was an increase of 2.6%. This was mainly due to higher housing assistance payment expense, but was offset by better results in ordinary maintenance and other expenses. And transitioning to key financial ratios, this is comparison of the debt to equity ratio from September 2023 to September 2024. There's a slight decrease here from 0.43 to 0.39. This signifies an improvement. Anything generally under 1 looks very good to investors, to creditors, because it signifies that the organization has lower financial risk and greater stability. And on the next slide, we have the current ratio. This is simply ratio of current assets to current liabilities. You want a higher number here. Anything over 2 is very good. It shows that you're able to satisfy current liabilities with current assets. There is a decrease here from 2.48 to 2.20, but again, that's because of that reclassification of the Converse Ranch 2 debt. So if you factor that out, that ratio actually increased to 2.54. So once that debt is refinanced, it will move, the majority of it will move to non-current, and this ratio will just back up.
Ratio go back up.
Yes, ma'am. And then also included in your packet is the cash investment summary. We did see an overall decrease in cash investments of 3.5 million over the previous quarter. This was mainly due to payments in connection with annual insurance premiums, funding for both the Snowden or Refugio limited partnerships, and payments to vendors in connection with operations at Beacon and Public Housing. We do expect that this cash use is going to slow down a little bit because our expenses were very accelerated, very heightened in the last few periods. So hopefully we see a slower usage of cash going forward the rest of the fiscal year. And Diana is going to, I'm going to tap Diana now. She's going to cover the grants and provide an update on the city housing bond funds.
Aaron, I'd like to go ahead and make a comment just based on, I did hear why are we looking at all this? And there are a lot of numbers on these pages, and I just want to say a few words about how complicated all this is and the different sources of income. And so just help me if I get off track here in terms of the amount of, we have 55 properties across the city. We have about 20,000 families that we work with in different areas. And we have to keep track of all of the income and the expenses for all those different sources of funding, whether that's someone who gets a certificate, whether that's a Beacon property like this one, or whether that's public housing that we own. And a lot of times the money that comes into one of those areas, we can't just use it anywhere. We have to use it in a specific place. And so what you're trying to do with your work is make sure that if we know we have needs in Beacon, we're bringing in income that we can use to fix a property or to make sure that we're planning for long-term maintenance. And so that's kind of the way I think about this, is that we've got a bunch of different buckets. We got to fill them up as we take money out.
Right.
Okay.
Everything you said is a fair statement.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have hundreds of companies and business units to keep straight. I have a staff of about 24, and they all are assigned various companies, business units. That goes beyond, we have a payroll team, we have an accounts receivable team, accounts payable team. So kudos to my staff for trying to keep, a grasp on all of this. And to go back to what you said about federal funds, Diana is the biggest proponent I know that is always questioning, is this an appropriate use of federal dollars?
We're here to be stewards of public resources, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just tiptoe.
Okay, so we've added this report on the request of the finance chair so that we could keep sort of more, you guys can keep a closer watch on the progress of our grants, right? We give you a grant. We've drafted this presentation, and y'all can decide whether you want to leave it in for the future quarters or if you're okay with the grants report as it is in the financial report.
And just to clarify, I think we have 3 pages. We have a grants report for capital fund grants. We have and that's broken down, congressional grants, City of San Antonio, program grants. And these are funds that we go out and try to get to make sure that we can that if free money's available, we can use it for our properties and our families.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm going to start off with just the HUD-related grants. Those are the CFP grants, the Capital Fund Grant Program. These only apply to public housing. They're limited to public housing. The first three grants that you have listed there as capital 22, 23, and 24 capital fund are an annual allocation we receive from HUD to address physical needs at our 70 public housing properties. All of those, other than 2023, is slightly off their obligation percentage. So within 2 years, you have to obligate 90% of your grant. Within the following 2 years, you have to expend 100% of your grant. So that 2023 capital grant is at 74% today, but at the December board meeting, it will be fully obligated once you approve the Riverside project. The other one that was not highlighted, and that was my error, is the 2020 lead-based paint grant. You can see that end date of 11/10/24 has passed, so that should have been highlighted in red. But Piper, who is grants analyst, has a verbal confirmation from HUD that they're going to give us an extension on that grant.
So let me just clarify. You just outlined a process that we have to obligate and then we have to expend. And if we don't meet the deadlines, then we lose the grant funding.
Recapture that funding.
But in this case, we have a verbal assurance that even though we haven't obligated and expended fully, that they're going to give us an extension.
That is correct.
Thank you.
So additionally, the capital fund grants are non-competitive, so the three are non-competitive. All the rest of them are competitive grants. So we have to apply for them for specific projects at specific properties. So all the rest of them, though, are, even though they're zero, they're all on track because they're actually in, with architect at this point, looking at, or with an engineer, looking at the type of work that we have to do to expend the grant funds. The safety and security grant is for 3 properties for lighting and intrusion alarm systems. And the related hazards grant is something that we just got access to. And those design specs are coming to the board also in December. So we should see that in the next quarter, some significant movement in the slide.
Thank you.
So the next slide is congressional grants, and these can be applied for our Beacon portfolio as well as public housing. And you can see that the first 2 rows, the Cuellar grant and the Gonzalez grant, those are for public housing properties. The third row, Towering Oaks and Cortland Heights, those are Beacon properties. And Alazan is a public housing property. So this has been a very painful process. I think if you had 30 minutes, Piper would love to come up here and tell you all of the pain that she's gone through just to gain access in the system to these grants. At this point, there's a 2-way application process. So first we apply to the congressperson's office, and they recommend it. It moves forward. It gets voted on. It gets approved, but then we have to start the whole process all over again within the HUD computerized system and apply for the grant again, and then it moves through the process. So Piper is working day and night to try to submit the grants within the system and move the projects along. So
How long does it take to go through the HUD system? On average, roughly.
well, this is a brand-new HUD system, right? So what the systems that we're accustomed to in public housing, Section 8, they're, I don't want to say easy, but easy to us, right? But DRGR is the system that this grant is using, is new to us as well as new to HUD.
Can I ask, are these, I know this isn't the right word anymore, are these earmarks?
These are earmarks.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
So the reason I ask that question is that other LISC offices around the country where I work, we've had this same exact situation with accessing funds that were set aside by Congress for specific purposes. And it's taken, in some cases, multiple years to access the funding. Now I think with the new Congress, we may not have this problem anymore. because we may not have this
Unfortunately.
money anymore. But this is really consistent with what I've been hearing from other places.
It's
And Chairwoman, if I could just add, I think the formal name for that Congress prefers is community project funding, but they're earmarks for
Right.
other.
Out of curiosity, with the new Congress coming in and new administration, are there any risk of these going away, or are they obligated now at this point? The funds will remain in place.
These are obligated, but just future ones, right?
Future, okay. Well,
Unless they're repealed, but
I guess if we hadn't used the money or haven't gone through the system yet, is there any risk that they could actually?
unless you don't meet your expenditure end date, right?
Okay.
Because these will be managed in the same system, the ELAC system, in the end, when we draw the funds down as our public housing and Section 8 funds are in.
Okay.
Next slide. So these are our housing bond projects with the city. And so 5 of the 7, as you all know, are in place. The Victoria Plaza, the roof replacement is well underway. And I believe the actual roof itself is almost complete, and they'll be moving on to other work there. Pecan Hill, that elevator modernization, that car is being manufactured right now. The WRI, those are for the single-family homes at the Westside Reinvestment Initiative, and those funds cannot be drawn until each individual home is sold. Cottage Creek and Woodhill, although they have very low or no percentage expended, both of those contracts are in place. They've already had the kickoff meetings with the contractors, so the work is started. So we expect, with windows at Woodhill and siding being a large piece of that, I imagine that a very large portion of that grant is going to be drawn down just when we order. That's 532 units. There's a lot of windows at Woodhill. And then Cottage Creek, that HVAC replacement is for 160 new HVAC units. So that contractor orders those, and we have to pay for those. That it'll out of that grant. And then for Mid-Crown and Ravello, those are both under review with the attorney, and Ravello, we have a meeting tomorrow to review this internally. So hopefully that goes to the city within the next couple of weeks.
What kind of rehab is going on?
At Ravello and Mid-Crown? Where is Miranda? There you go. Miranda's going to tell you.
Hello, good afternoon. So at Mid-Crown, we have common area elevator modernization. We have some interior finishes, flooring, painting, cabinetry, things like that. And then at Ravello, we are doing more exterior items. So we are doing parking lot, we're doing HVAC units, those kind of things. I can provide this very specific scope. I don't have it memorized yet, I'm sorry.
Can I just repeat what I heard? I heard that for Mid-Crown, it's interior finishes, an elevator modernization.
Interior finishes in common areas?
Common area improvement. And then, yes, elevator, common area, and interior finishes.
Correct.
So are any of those within specific units, or is that the complex overall? Do you know? I don't want to put you on the spot.
So at Mid-Crown, is that better? Can you hear me now? At Mid-Crown, there is going to be specific interior units. We're trying to determine what the best value is, because we don't have the ability to pay for the entire building, but we have made some substantial renovation progress on some of our newer units that we've just done turnovers on. And so we don't want to go in and utilize funds in a unit that looks really good now.
Would that allow us to lease up some units that are vacant and to reduce some of the nuisance issues that people have been reporting to us?
That would help, but we're also doing an aggressive marketing strategy right now to get Beacon Portfolio Mid-Crown included leased up.
Okay. So we recognize that vacant units are an issue at this property, and we're trying to address that to eliminate nuisances.
Vacant units across the portfolio are problematic. It gives people an area to do things we would rather them not do. And so keeping our units full is our best defense against that. And so while we're in the process, we're just trying to make targeted adjustments so that we're not having a bunch of units sit vacant that are rent ready, because that becomes problematic.
Thank you.
So what does it tell me?
Gotta cut that off.
If you have questions, we can address them after the meeting. We'll go ahead with the presentation, and then we can talk afterwards. Thank you.
So those two particular bonds have a 100% match, so the construction projects themselves would be $5 million, but we're only listing the grant itself from the city bonds. So next slide. Now, finally, these are our program grants that are managed by Susan and her team with the CDI group, and these are all on track other than the VIA grant. There's a very small amount that has been unexpended, and she has in her hand a document to extend the grant, and she just needs signatures, so
That's great.
everything else is on track.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? Thank you. All right, we can move on to the next item, which is with regard to the quarterly internal audit report. Hi, Allison. Thank you. Hi.
Okay, so this slide is just a summary of all the quarter one activities that we've done for internal audit. I do want to highlight the family self-sufficiency numbers. So for the first quarter, IA has approved 26 escrows from July 1st through September 30th. And so we've approved a total of $402,629.65. And that's an average escrow of $15,485.76. So that's a significant increase from the number of escrows that we approved last year.
Wow.
The next slide, we have the 2023-2024 audit plan, and that was the controlled self-assessment for asset management, the financing and refinancing of real estate assets. As of today, the draft SOP has been submitted to the key stakeholders for review and comments. Once that's completed, we will send out a finalized report for approval, and then we will send it out to the CEO for review. The next slide, we have the control self-assessment for safety and security, the triage of high severity incidences. As of today, the draft SOP is in progress. We are looking to form some focus groups so that way our end users can look at the SOP before we finalize it and make sure that it makes sense for all end users. The next slide. So for the audit of the Beacon Communities Affordable Program Regulatory and Fair Housing Compliance, while this slide does say that the fieldwork has been completed and the draft is in progress, we have the draft report prepared. We're just waiting for the exit conference to finalize that. The next slide, we have the CDI grant compliance and financial performance. As of today, the fieldwork is completed, and we will have an exceptions meeting with CDI management on December 5th, so that will be updated accordingly next quarter. For the Beacon repayment agreements, as of today, this fieldwork has been completed. The draft report is in progress on this. For the program regulatory and fair housing compliance, this audit was kicked off on October 8th, and fieldwork is currently underway. For the regular compliance audits, we have the 3 programs: assisted housing, public housing, and Beacon 60 files review from July 1st through November 1st. For public housing, we've completed 231 file reviews, and for Beacon Communities, we've completed 77, and partnerships is a total of 126. We have 6 open action items. I do was pending the public housing repayment SOP. That one is completed today. I did receive that final draft, so that one has been closed as of today. All other, there's 2 that are pending updates from Section 3. One that's pending an update to the full cycle recruiting SOP and the creation of the SOP from Human Resources. And then we have 2 additional procurement corrective action items that are currently open that are scheduled to be completed by December 31st. And then we also have one for Section 3 that is pending the review of some contracts that are going to be completed by December 31st.
Before we move on to third-party audits, this looks like a pretty heavy schedule. Is this consistent with your typical schedule?
Yes.
And are you fully staffed to handle this workload?
Yes, ma'am. I have total, there's 5 internal audit staff members. So we are fully staffed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Allison,
Yes, sir.
before you move on, I want to go back to the compliance audits. The files that you review are resident files at the offices?
Yes.
Okay. Are you finding a lot of problems with those files, or most of them compliant? Because we're hearing complaints that they haven't been recertified. Are you finding that people are not recertified in a timely manner?
We have not looked at that. We haven't found any recertification issues. The main issues that we do see are rent determination issues, but those rent determination errors are completed within the 30-day HUD standard. We send them back for correction. So they should be completed within the 30-day HUD standard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So for the third-party audit, the HUD, the comprehensive compliance review from HUD, they were on site from May 13th through the 17th. We did review this with you, asked for the corrective action items for the and observations. So if you go to the next slide, I listed out what was currently open. The one at the top where it says 2 pending language translation updates to the HCV and VAWA handouts, the translation have been completed. We're just waiting for maintenance to come and put them in so we can put the flyers on the wall. So that should be completed by Friday. After that, we have 5 additional pending action items. Those are being reviewed and updated as they are completed.
What languages are those that are being translated?
For these specific ones, they're Spanish, but I believe, Stephanie, if I'm not correct, if I'm wrong, they have 3 additional. I think it's, I'm not sure.
Farsi, Russian, and...
I think so.
So they reviewed what the common languages are for San Antonio, but then also what are the common languages for our residents. I do believe Russian is one of them. One of the ones that was identified was Vietnamese. That we've noticed actually speak Vietnamese, so we're still verifying under those. That's why we're mainly doing the Spanish right now, as that's the highly identified. And then they're going through the next 5 to review for 3 of them to be selected so that we can rework.
Some of the properties, Russian and Farsi, or some that they spoke that language in some of the public housing, yes.
So going on to the next slide. So the Emergency Housing Voucher Program, Financial Program Review, that kicked off on June 4th and it concluded on June 7th. We received the final report and it contained no findings or concerns and the review has been closed.
Can I go back to the action items on the third-party audit, which was the HUD on-site audit? I assume that this reference to the rollout and completion of the call center system is that implementation of a technology solution and a staffing solution so that we will have a greater percentage of calls answered coming, inbound calls to the agency.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. And then the comprehensive checklist for the family self-sufficiency participant files, that will allow case managers to quickly monitor whether things have been completed and, all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We have no other items on the agenda. It's 2:03. Do I hear a move to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned
For the Finance
for
Committee.
the Finance Committee.
Go ahead and go right into it. We're past 2.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move into the operations meeting.
Yeah. clock is way off.
No, that clock is not working at all.
My parking.
Thank
You
you.
guys gonna take it and tell me.
Here.
It's a Toyota.
I didn't read the thing I was.
Let's,
Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's.
Can we please have order in the room, please?
Used it within the context of the agenda, so I'm.
Hello and welcome to Opportunity's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. Please note the meeting will be recorded in its entirety. We conduct Commissioner roll call.
It's not needed.
The time is 2:04. You may call the meeting to order.
The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 51.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The board or committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
We have one citizen signed up to speak.
Are you present?
How y'all doing? Thank y'all for having us come up here and complain. My concern is about security around here, like people were saying about the homeless and everything. I live right up there on the 3rd floor, and I see a cop coming in. He drives through the gate, go all the way around, come to that door, and he's gone. He don't even walk the building or anything. And my second concern is the roach problem that we are having up in here. It's like there's empty apartments over here, but when they spray our apartments, they don't go to the other empty apartments and spray. And so they'll run towards our apartment. I spray, they spray. It's not helping anything, you know? So that's my concern. But thank y'all for listening.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment before we go into this portion of the meeting. Ladies, those of you present may not understand a lot of the things that we're discussing, but they are needed to be discussed. We have these meetings every month and we talk about issues that affect our organization and affect our residents. And so if you all have any questions, you can see staff members after the meeting is over. We cannot allow questions to be asked from the floor. We receive presentation from the staff members, and then we as a board member ask questions to clarify things that we need to clarify before we move these issues onto our next board meeting. So we appreciate you all understanding that. And like I say, if you all have any questions, there'll be staff members here after the meeting that will be happy to take your questions or answer those for you. Thank you. Item number 3, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6606, authorizing Opportunity Home to assign 80 project-based vouchers, PBVs, to the City of San Antonio Development, the Commons at Acequia Trail. Stephanie Rodriguez, Director of Assistant Housing Programs.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Rodriguez. I'm the Director for our Assisted Housing Program, so that residents also know. So I'm coming today because as we continue to work with our partners in our community and working to make sure that we have affordability and deeply affordable units in the area, we were approached for a project that's coming up called the Commons at Acequia Trails. And this is one of the largest permanent supportive housing developments that is going to occur here in San Antonio with 201 units in partnership with the San Antonio Housing Trust Public Facility Corps, which is with the City of San Antonio. And then it's going to have supportive services that are provided by Sam's Ministries, which is another one of our partners that we commonly work with for our residents. And so at this
be off of the old Corpus Christi area, Old Corpus Christi Road, and the Broads Master Plan Community is what they have listed on master plan. It is a new construction. They received some housing bonds as a part of it, but they're also seeking what we call project-based vouchers. So at this community, they have 132 efficiencies and 69 one-bedrooms. It is 30 and 60% AMIs, and we are not the developer on this one. We're not a partner on this one in the development. We're mainly just partnering to provide project-based assistance at that community. And so part of the supportive services that they're going to also offer is job readiness, money management, mental health resources, and other medical resources for those that might have had exiting homelessness or were previously affected by homelessness. Now, for project-based vouchers, just in case you weren't aware of the community, under project-based vouchering, we have a program cap. So for our organization, however many vouchers you have, you're only allowed to do like 20% of those to be project-basing. And with project-basing is you're tying those vouchers to a specific site instead of having them be able to go out and search. But what it does is it allows for a community to be able to continue to move through their supportive services with that guaranteed rent that goes with it to give other services to those residents that are able to live there. So under our HOTMA rule that just recently came out, or HUD's HOTMA rule, which is the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. Before, you used to only be able to do 20% of the community or 25 units in order to have the number of units there. They did raise it to 25%, but there is a caveat in the rule that says you can do up to 40% of a community to be project-based as long as they meet one of certain criteria, which is that they're in a qualifying census tract if there's less than 20% or more of the 20% or less of poverty there, or if they have a vacancy rate that's really low. This community is in that census tract that meets that poverty. And so with 40%, you can go up to 40% of the 201 units. And so we're currently, we have told them we would hold 80 units for their community, which would be that 40%, in order to continue to partner with them. And these would be deeply affordable. They have lots of services, and the SAM Ministries is going to offer the supportive services, not just those that are on the project-based vouchers, but to all of the people that live on the community. So it would help them to make sure that they can continue those services through the time period of their residency and however long that property is able to continue to do their services.
So those vouchers are tied to that property only. So the resident that receives that voucher, if they move, that voucher stays there then, and it goes to the next person that comes in?
So for project-based, yes, the community would always have that 80 project-based vouchers. Now, with project-based rules, this is not going to be one that's under our modified project-based voucher program. And under our modified, it does stay with the community. If the person moves off, they lose that assistance, right? If they go to another community. Under a regular project-based, they have the option, if they stay in that unit, it's 1 or 2 years, then they would be able to transfer to a regular HCV. So they could continue their assistance, right? If they no longer need those supportive services at that community and they want to try to thrive in a non-supportive service community at a regular apartment complex, somebody else would be able to move into that community still with that assistance while that person continues to also receive assistance.
So PBV stays, HCVs go with them?
Yes.
Thank you.
You said they have to 1 or 2 years.
I believe it's 1 year in the policy, but the reason I say 1 or 2 is because I'm not confident right now. It's a very long policy.
Next one of those, okay.
Yes, but our current modified project-based vouchers are all through our communities, and on those with that policy, it doesn't go to HCV. You have to stay at that community with that assistance. So for this resolution, it would be normally also explaining that under project-based vouchering, you normally have to go through an RFP process, right? Request for proposals. But there is a rule that says you do not have to if they were awarded under another competitive process within the last 3 years. This community was approved under the housing bond for that competitive process in order to get funds. And so we'd like to piggyback on that. And normally, if you're doing your own RFP, that's where you would get board approval when you make your selections under the RFP process. But because we're doing the other competitive, you don't necessarily need your board approval.
But we like to present it to you in order to make sure that you are on board with that project and be able to sign off on that resolution as a part of that subsidy layering review. HUD will look and make sure that the property is not getting too much funding for the property and that they're receiving the adequate amount in order to continue their services.
Okay. I think it's probably important to note, I just want to jump in on this one, that this is a good example of what staff has done to partner with our community members. This project does not work without our involvement.
Correct.
I certainly have seen that. I want to make sure, Michael, that you and the staff get certainly recognized for it. I mean, this isn't easy. It pulls in extra work on our behalf, even though we're not development partners on the deal. But it's a needed addition to the city, and it helps our partners at SAMS.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. If I can just add, this would be the largest allocation of PBVs the organization has provided. And what better than to our partners at the Housing Trust and SAMS Ministries? And what better than permanent supportive housing, which is important to our city. So it's a win-win across the board. And we hope, you would consider supporting the resolution.
Can I make a comment at this? I'm going to abstain from this item, but not because I have any lack of confidence in this program. SAM is the largest recipient of HUD homeless funding in the community. They have a significant track record in serving this population, and they have an excellent reputation and lots of extensive partnerships. This is the first time they've done a tax credit project as a developer. And so my agency, LISC, is providing them with some capacity building funding around the tax credit development process. For that reason, because this project and the agency have received a grant funding, some grant funding from my organization, I'm going to abstain from voting on this, but it's not because I have any concerns at all. In fact, we are supporting the project in another capacity.
Thank you, Commissioner. So do I hear a motion?
I make a motion that we approve Resolution 6606.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved.
You'll abstain.
I abstain.
And one abstention.
And I seconded.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I'm also the next one, so I'm going to stay right here.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're the next one.
Item number 4, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6605, approving the 2025 area fair market rents, the SAFMR payment standard, and the project-based voucher PBV program payment standard schedule. Stephanie Rodriguez.
Hello again. So what I'm coming today on this one is what we call our payment standards. So HUD publishes every year their fair market rents. And as we are a metropolitan area, there's also small area fair market rents. And so we normally have to review those annually when HUD posts them. When we have to make a determination on if we're changing our payment standards annually and come to our board for approval whenever you make those changes. So we are a small area fair market designated area because of the size of our area and the number of vouchers we have. And this is the regular SAFMR is going to be for our housing choice voucher program. And the payment standard is what we use to set the maximum subsidy that we can pay for a residence unit. And that's before we deduct any of their annual income calculation portion of the rent. So for whenever we set these, HUD has information about 90 to 110% is what you can normally set your payment standards to. Because we are MTW, or moving to work, we have the option to set those outside that 90 to 110 in order to serve the purposes of either serving more in your community, maintaining capacity, or bringing other development services or other items that you can work. So we do have an activity that lets us set it outside that 90 to 110, which means you can either set it higher or lower. And we have currently for the small area fair market rents, instead of giving a resident a list of every single big zip code with different amounts that they're allowed to search for, which could be over like 200, we group them together in 10 groups. And these groups usually are with a $50 range. Payment standards. So our proposal is to set our new payment standards. Normally we do January 1st for any movers. So if we issue somebody a voucher January 1 or after, would get the new payment standard rates, and recertifications would be effective April 1. And the reason we do that is because we process recertifications. We send out their paperwork 120 days in advance. So by the time we would have that set up and approved, we've already processed probably through January and February. So in order to set it to where they don't have to be reprocessed and cause confusion to residents that are staying in place, we would set them for April 1 for recertifications. Now, we want to give you background too. Whenever we make choices on how we set our payment standards, we look at lots of different things. We look at how to not affect the households that are being currently served in the least a lot higher. Sometimes what happens is the funding that you receive is behind, right? The inflationary factor occurs the next year. And so in order to continue maintaining your residents, you might have to look and see if you're not setting them as high. Planning, if you don't have full utilization, you want it set higher so you can build your utilization. We also look at the family's choice, where they're able to go based on those zip code groupings and the power of the voucher. And the way we say power is if the voucher amount helps them find a unit on the amount that's allowed. We also look at the current number of families that we serve and the impact of changing payment standards on them where they're currently at. And then having that minimum financial impact on our budget as well. Because when you raise your payment standards higher, you're spending more money out to give out to those landlords. You might not be able to serve as many households because you're spending all your money. That makes sense. So we look at all of those whenever we go into our factors of determining our payment standards. Now, with HOTMA, I talked about it a little bit earlier, there is a new rule that before, when we would set our payment standards, our organization, because we are also MTW, we have our recertification set to every 3 years. So somebody does their paperwork this year, they won't have to do it again until 2027. And so then that payment standard change wouldn't occur until there. We wouldn't see necessarily a budget implication on a change of a payment standard until 2027 for the families that had 2024 recerts. But with HOTMA, they changed the rule saying, when you change your payment standard, you have to change everybody on your program within 1 year to that new payment standard, whether they're recertifying or not. And so with this, any changes that we make for our payment standards are all going to accumulate in that next fiscal year. You're not going to have the option to break it up over the next 3 years to save on your budget. Now, whenever we also did this, we have to also review rent burden. So when a family comes up for recertification, before we went to small area fair market rents, somebody might have the fair market rents, and there's not too many of them, might have been fairly high at that time. With small area fair market rents, some areas went lower. And so we had a protection in place to keep them from changing that. With the HOTMA rule, it kind of takes that away because you have to update your payment standards in order to get them in compliance with that current. So previously, we've come to you before where we talk about our payment standards, and we normally only show you group 1 and group 10, just to kind of show you the lowest payment standards and the highest payment standards. For this payment standard setting in our small area fair markets, we're proposing to not change our current amounts because families are still able to go out and search, except for group 8 and 9. On group 8 and 9, you're going to see, so in blue on that one line here, blue means that we went a little higher, right, 1242 to 1269, to try to keep it more in line with the market for that area. While if you see just the bold in the dark, 2538, those went a little bit down, and that's to keep it more in line with the market on how it's changed. One thing that's not going to be reflected on this, that it will be more explained in your packet, is that we also moved zip codes around. So if a zip code like 78204, right, we'll say, if that went from group 1 to group 3, we went ahead and made that change because that will affect those households in that grouping. It would be a higher payment standard. Those that were in maybe group 10, that based on last market study, those rents are not as high. So those are going to go back down. So even though we're not changing the payment standards across the grouping, the zip codes are still changing. And so there is still a budgetary impact. And what we do is we also review with the assumption that we're going to have families move, right? And I might want to go to group 10 and have more opportunities there, or have different schools, different things there. And so that would raise our cost. And so but whenever we do these, we do like a review to assume quite a few families might move. And so we look at it as worst case scenario when we go over those budget financial impacts. So on this next slide.
So the groups are different areas of town?
Yes, so group 1 is going to be the lower rents in the area.
And
Group 10 is going to be the highest.
Okay.
And those, they're
dictated by zip code, not
correct.
No correlation to city council districts.
Correct. No, it's just zip codes. And that's based on the study that HUD does. So it's not even the city that does the study on the rents.
Just in terms of actual number of units, looking at Group 8, do you have a sense of how many 4+ bedroom units we're currently supporting in Group 8 census tracts?
Less than 40.
Okay.
And so that's a big reason why we lowered those, because we did not have a
We don't
large
have a lot
number
in
of
there.
families in those bedroom sizes.
Okay. And then one more question about that. How is this information communicated to our landlords?
So for our landlords, we normally will post it, and we post all zip codes on the website. We'll put which zip codes are in which groups, and then at the bottom, they'll get the information on what's allowed there. We already talk with our landlords and kind of say like it's going to come up soon. More than likely, HUD publishes it every year in October, and we're probably going to have it effective in January. So they're kind of already used to the changes. Now, this doesn't mean if we set it to this now, it doesn't mean that we might come to you later in the year if we end up having more money. I know Diana's not going to say yes to that. But if we end up getting like a larger, well, there's the loss is not, we can continue to set more, but we're not seeing that. You can always change your payment standards again. Just because you said it once doesn't mean that you can't change it again in the year. 1 year, we changed it 3 times to residents.
That's helpful. Thank you.
So on the financial impact, and we put on there, we wanted to show you the full, right? So for 2023 to 2024 fiscal year, our average expense was that $103,860,000. And so this was a $8,655,276 per month HAP expense. With the change, if we keep them the same, but moving those zip codes around, lowering those ones that we don't have too many households in, with the assumption of families possibly moving to higher zip codes than they are currently now, 3% increase, which is $322,440. And that would let us continue to try to serve as many households as we possibly can while they're still able to search and find units with the amounts that are available on that voucher.
So one more question there on the searching and finding process. Would a decrease in the voucher holder's ability to find a unit within the time frame allotted, would that trigger us to take a look at our rent standards?
So normally we do review and see. So that 1 year that we changed it 3 times, we had families who were searching for 6 to 12 months, which is a really long time. And HUD does state the average right now is actually 6 months for families to find a unit. But when we had changed, when we did that units within 2 to 3 months because of those updated amounts. And so if we do see it getting sluggish, we will normally say, okay, well, it looks like our vouchers aren't, and we'll go to our executive leadership team to kind of talk about it. And then you might see us come back up here.
And can you help me understand, is that real-time monitoring? How are we monitoring that, how long it takes someone to find a unit that, to utilize the voucher?
So we normally review quarterly on the success rate is what we kind of call it. Although we do talk with HUD once a month. They normally will look at the number of vouchers we have on the street and they kind of tell us what they see as our success rate. But we also review the waiting list information in order to see when a voucher is issued date and then the lease update, how long it takes them for that process. Now we did have we were working through an update through our elite system. So now we have a little bit of corrective data that we're doing on previous information, but we were then looking, okay, well, when did we issue it? When did they fully lease up? Correlating data that way instead of running a single report.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, there's a second part to this, right? That's for our regular housing choice voucher. We still have to also set what we do for our project-based vouchering and what we call our mod rehab. So this is the regular fair market rents. We call it the main area. So for this one, it's not set to the metropolitan area instead of just each zip code. This would be San Antonio, Bexar County. And we would set these and we use this standard when we work out deals for project-based vouchering. Normally what we do is we would do a rent analysis. So we would say, what do you want for your rent for PBV? What is the fair market rent set at? And then what is the comparable units in the area for that project? Credit rent versus the FMR and then, or the requested rent. But we have to set them every year. And we normally set this to 90 to 110 as well, or in that range. We just set it to I believe. And so it really only affects based vouchers. And each year the properties under the project-based vouchering, what they do is they then have to request for a rental increase. It's still compared the same way. You look at the 3 and you go For our projects, so because we're such a large area, our policy has that for HUD says you can either use the small area fair market or you can use the metropolitan area fair market rents to determine your PBV sets. But we have our policy that says we're going to go with the higher of. So if groups 1, 2, 3, and 4 are lower than the metropolitan area, we're going to go with the MAFMR. If it's higher on the SFMR, we're going to use that one instead, so that we can maximize for that for our partners. Don't have to compare against a bunch of different groupings. It's really just those bedroom sizes 0 to 6. So last year's amounts to this year's amounts, it's not a huge change, but it is a significant change on some of those. And the budgetary side is, again, not as high because it is limited to our project-based vouchers. So if you go to the next slide for me, please. So this one's annual, not the last one I talked about was monthly. I wanted to give you the monthly amount. It's a little bit easier. This one is the annual impact. 1,000. So it's a 0.4% increase in that. And it's because mainly it is those project-based vouchering, and we don't have a ton of them on our program right now. So with those two, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask?
No questions.
No questions? Do I hear a motion to move Resolution 6607 to the board meeting?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Wait, 6607?
It's 605.
I'm sorry, 6605.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion 6605 carries to the board meeting.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, my bad. Item number 5, consideration appropriate action regarding Resolution 6607, inducing the participation of San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to serve as the sole member of the general partner, landowner, and general contractor for River Breeze Apartments transaction, and authorizing all filings and agreements with Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs in connection with applications for low-income housing tax credits, and authorizing the negotiation and execute Chief Real Estate and Development Officer. Hi,
Good
Evelyn.
afternoon. Before I get started, I want you to know and introduce Carly Gass. She's the Director of Development for Kittle. This particular year for inducement only, so this is a 4% credit bond deal. They were fortunate enough to receive a reservation November 1st, which means now the clock is ticking. They have 180 days to get to closing, and I believe the deadline is April 30th of 2025. We're coming before you today to ask permission and approval to start negotiations of a MOU to be a particular project. Can we go to the next slide? And just very quickly, just as a refresher, Kittle has over 20 properties in Texas, and they span anywhere from Beaumont, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, and San Marcos, DFW, and Odessa. Next slide. This particular project is in the southwest area of San Antonio, off of Southwest Loop 410 and Palo Alto Road. So again, out by Palo Alto College, A&M University, Toyota. So it's a very popular area and is in great need of affordable housing. Next slide. There. It sits in District 4 and is serviced by Southwest Independent School District. It sits on 14 acres. Kittle is proposing 264 units with 10% at 30% of AMI. We've got 158 units at 60% and 79 units at 70% of area median income. They're going to do averaging, and right now the average income is about 59.92%. Again, 4% tax credits and bonds for a total development cost of approximately $69.5 million. Next slide. 41.4 million, up 2.6 million. Per unit cost is $263,000. And again, for a total development cost of $69 million. There is a total developer fee of $7.8 million right now. Next slide. So with every deal that we're bringing to the agency, it's not only to provide beautiful new affordable units to our residents, but also to make sure that the Housing Authority is a fair partner in this. So we will get a 2% issuance fee on the bonds. The reservation right now was approved for 40 million. We would also receive a $5,000 a year in asset management fee. We have a developer fee split of 70-30 and deferred developer fee of 77%. Now, this is important because previously, we would see 30 to 35% deferred. This is a lot. 77% is a lot of deferred fee. However, right now, we're in negotiations, and Kiddo has agreed to make sure that before the 15-year compliance period, that we're made whole with that developer fee, so nothing should go unpaid. Right now, and also we are negotiating a 50-50 cash flow split on this particular project. Next slide.
Can you address while we're,
Let's go back one slide.
Sure.
Go ahead.
do you have a question? Or?
You go first. Okay.
Can you address the conditions upon which the deferred portion of the developer fee will be available?
So it's all going to be dependent on the numbers, right? So right now, we know that costs are high, interest rates are high. With this new administration, we don't know what to expect in the coming years, but with this approval, Kiddo will be able to move forward with their lenders and investors and provide them some assurance that we are in the game with them. And that will help them to improve the numbers and lock the numbers in before the new administration comes in. Again, they've got a deadline of April 30th to get to closing, but I believe we're on a shorter time frame. We would come back in January with final numbers for a February board approval of the final deal.
And I'm just thinking about what types of milestones that we would release developer fee at, and whether, and really I'm just getting back to questions we've had before from the Board of Commissioners about the performance of the project and the ability of Opportunity Home to ensure that projects are performing the way that they're projected, and that developer fee would be available for a project that's performing as expected with returns to the agency.
Yeah, we actually negotiated that on a specific project. So we just supported services in this project, and we're worried about the maintenance costs per unit, to the operational cost per unit. And so we went to Kittle, and they actually did guarantee that our deferred developer fee, that if it's pushed out too far, we'll get paid at year 15. And so we actually put that in there to make sure that we actually would be compensated on this. And as you know, in all of our deals, this one, the deferred developer fee goes out so far, but on all of our new deals that we're bringing to you, that are tax credit types of deals, that we will have asset management sign off on before any cash flow is paid, then it goes back into the development. So we're not getting a bill that's like it's 30 years old at year 15. And
That's
so, thanks.
I'm trying to meet Miranda's eyes out here somewhere.
You're asking us questions from
Ding, ding, ding.
But I was going to say, my question was specific to the cash flow. I seemed a little outside of what I had maybe seen in the norm. So this is the situation where they're not paid out, based on that comment. They're not paid out until the condition of the property is reviewed.
Correct.
And
That is
we're involved in that process.
right. And the other,
That's great.
the other nice thing about these deals is because we're a bond issuer, we receive that 2% fee. So on 40 million, you're looking at 800,000 at closing. So by the time we close on this deal, 300,000 goes to our attorneys, and the rest is for the agency.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Do I hear a motion?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
I will second, or you second? Either
Go
way.
ahead. Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Resolution 6607 moves to the board meeting.
Thank you.
But to the Kittle representative, thank you for, good faith efforts in the negotiations with us.
Yeah.
It was an item of intense scrutiny by this board at one point, as far as the properties are concerned and the maintenance of the properties. So we know it's never easy, but we appreciate the partnership.
Yes, same here. And understandably so, your staff was great to work with in finding a solution. So we really appreciate it and look forward to working with you.
Good luck at closing.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Congratulations on your allocation.
Yeah.
Item number 6, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6608, authorizing the consideration of and entering into preliminary documentation for the proposed Creekside at Lookout transaction, including authorizing the San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to enter into memorandum of understanding with respect to its participation in the Creekside at Lookout transaction. Timothy Elcott, Executive Vice President, Development and General Counsel.
Right, this is a Creekside at Lookout. I wish I had an exclamation point at the end of Lookout. That'd just be Lookout. But it's off Lookout Road. I'm sure you all have been there. If you've ever driven to Austin, you drive along 1604, take a left, and by the IKEA over there. But first I want to introduce Rajiv. He came here, and Rajiv, do you mind standing up and just telling that that's your Delaware overview, but in 2 minutes or so, a little bit about your company, other types of deals like you've done, who the partners have been, and so they have some confidence in who this guy is that came up to here today.
They're going to give me a microphone, so that way it picks it up online.
Hello.
Yep.
So my name is Rajiv Puri. I started the company Athena Domain back in 2007. We've developed multiple properties in single family, multifamily. We've done PFC, we've done medical offices, retail, so we're a diversified real estate development company. We have done several multifamily projects. We have done 2 PFC projects with San Antonio Housing Trust that are both built, and they're they've been very successful, throwing off cash flow involved. We have another PFC that is under construction under the new legislation changed under the PFC law that started about 2 months back. And then we have this project that Tim is going to talk about where we already own the land. So from an execution standpoint, you should feel comfortable that we already own the land. We don't have that risk. And we're not looking for any equity or debt commitment from Opportunity Home. That will be on us. And happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. And so what Rajiv have done is he owns a number of acres over there. So he's already been at Starbucks. He has some medical that he's putting in, and a couple other buildings. I forgot the other ones. He has some retail, some medical, Starbucks, and I forgot what else do you have? And public storage over there as well. So he's doing the whole area. And I won't take too much of your time, but what's important is last legislative session on PFCs, there was a lot of changes in the law. And there was concern that there wasn't deeper affordability, there wasn't family size adjustment for the units, that the affordable units were throughout the complex. And so the new law, I'll call it the new law for the next 5 years, but the new law, all the concerns that were raised by Heather Way in the UT report, you have to comply with them. So this is actually addressing a lot of the concerns that you may not have seen in deals in other outside of San Antonio. The reality is, just to say this, is that the deals we've done before actually was compliant with the new law. So it actually didn't impact us much, but it's good for you to know, if everyone ever questions you, that this is actually under all the new standards that the legislature came back with. The other thing you should know is we will be bringing this back to you again. We have to, under the new law. So there are some things that are a little bit different. And one is we have to write a letter to every taxing jurisdiction to let them know it's coming off the tax rolls. They don't have an opportunity to object, but you got to let them know. And so those letters will be going out once we have this MOU. And also we have to have an appraiser come out and say this project would not be viable but for it being a tax credit deal. So that's why we have to come back twice on this. So it is a little bit different, but it is a very good project. You'll see the location. We can go to the next slide. You'll see here, it's right by the gas station, right behind the Shell there, and the racetrack is right up the road there too. But here's a lot of the workforce housing that's in the area. This is a true workforce house development that happens to be at Great Hearts near there. My kids went to Great Hearts, not a different location though. But so there's good schools, there's after school care in the area. And it's actually hard for us to get projects on the north side. And we really need housing in all areas of Texas and San Antonio. But it's nice to have more projects on the north side. And I hope to bring you some more of these sort of projects on the north side because people do live and work out, would like to work out there in some reduced rent things, reduced rent apartments. And the other thing that's really important is that the rents are capped on a percentage of their income based upon income size, which you didn't see under the old law. Here's a lot of the amenities. I'm going to skip it, but it's like you'd see in a type of Class A apartment complex. Next slide. Major employers, they're listed there. Next slide. Here's a rendering of the development. You'll see that we have 10% at 60, 40% at 80, and 50% market. It's a 303 new deal. It's about $49 million, the total development cost in Judson School District.
You have council support?
We have not met with the council yet, but we have done another PFC deal in that district in the past. So we will reach out to the council with yours.
Okay.
Next slide. Here are the deal terms. So we get $250,000 of fee. If you look at the very bottom there, it says total cash flow SAHA because we don't get paid, during the construction period, and then it sort of tallies up at the end. We also have attorney's fees. You'll see we get percentage of the property tax savings, and there's asset management fee because Miranda needs to pay her staff. And you'll see that there's also fees for if there's a sale. We don't have on here for refi. We actually make a fee there too. Rajiv says we have too many fees. I think we need more, but 2% of gross sales, and there's no equity from us on the project.
So I want to make a comment to make sure it's clear to me that we will get paid out of surplus, and if there isn't enough surplus to cover the payment, that when we do waterfall, then we're at the top of the list.
That's right.
Thank you.
Well, probably the mortgage is at the top, but yeah.
Well, right. It's like the IRS. If they owe money to the IRS, I know yeah, I got you.
Yeah, we're towards the top.
Right, we're top-ish.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide. Here are some other developments that he's done with the San Antonio Housing Trust. I don't have the names of them, but Rajiv knows them. But there's two other projects that he's done with the San Antonio Housing Trust.
Careful about showing us pictures. We're going to win it all, right?
And this was Loretta. And there we go. So we actually support to approve the MOU. With the approval of the MOU, we have to send out some things that the legislators require. And then but we're not going to send out a notice to taxing jurisdictions unless we knew we had your all support. And so then we'll send those letters out, and we'll bring it back one more time. There's a few other things we have to do that I mentioned with getting appraisal from CBRE. So you will see it one more time, but I know Rajiv wants to have confidence that this will go forward at this juncture, with these splits and these business terms we showed you.
Any other questions?
I just want to reiterate, thank you for being here today, and thank you for being a partner for us, and that the deal terms that we see do reflect concerns that the commissioners have raised over previous transactions, and I feel like we are learning and moving forward and utilizing these tools. And I know that the state level changes often were in response to projects being taken off the tax rolls.
That's
with
right.
Very little benefit to the community.
That's right. New construction, they really had an issue with taking existing deals off the tax rolls that were naturally affordable.
Right, with no notice to anyone, and yeah.
That's right.
So,
We're doing everything right on this.
thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve 6608 forward.
We have a motion here, second.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have approval
Good
to
luck.
move resolution 6608 to the board meeting. I am going to check. Oh, are they going out? I'm going to I'm going to take a 5-minute break for bathroom break real quick, because if not, then we don't have quorum. So be right back.
Okay. Everybody take a break, 5 minutes.
I think it's important. It does seem to me.
Take it easy. Man, I pushed the thing.
Far taller than me.
Check this out. I know you got to go.
They come this way a little bit. They had trouble with hearing me last time, so, and then we'll just we'll
Which one of these deals is Victor's?
The last.
We can please come back together again. Thank you.
ARDC is that?
Tempe, number 7.
Oh, good, okay.
This one.
This one. Why not?
I don't see any.
Oh, Tampico, yeah.
There we go. Microphone.
Yeah. He never ages. It's exactly
Looks the same.
Seems unfair.
Bring us back in.
Hello and welcome back. The time is 2:58 and the board has returned from their recess.
As soon as we're done with this.
Item number 7, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6613, authorizing the acquisition and assumption of the Class B limited partnership interests and obligations in Tampico Apartments LP by San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation, authorizing the acquisition and assumption of the developer rights and obligations and other matters in connection therewith. And Miranda Castro, Chief Asset Management Officer.
Oh, can you hear me? I was making sure. No. Okay, perfect. So if you will allow me a little bit of leeway, I did want to state my opinion about the asset management review. I know that this is not our current item we're addressing, but I did want to ensure on the record that I am in favor of it. And while nothing is perfect and there is no guarantee, this is probably the best thing we've had in a while. And while it doesn't solve for a project that's not cash flowing, because if there's no cash flow, it doesn't make everything perfect, but it gives us a better guarantee than we've had before. So I just wanted to put that on record because I was hiding in the back.
Thank you.
Okay, so Aspire at Tampico. So this, I have Mr. Victor Miramontes is here. He represents the Class B Special Limited Partner Mission Tampico SLP. So I wanted to just give a little bit of a background on this asset. So what we are asking is outside of the normal aspects that we usually come to present. So you've heard me come and request to acquire the interest in partnerships quite a few times. That is the difference with this is this project is still within its initial compliance period. So this project just placed into service in 2022. So we are at year 3. I think we're going into year 3. And so this project is something that we are looking to acquire the interest now for a variety of different reasons. So currently, the project right now it's 200 units, multifamily project. It placed into service in 2022. It is on the near west side. It's inside the Loop 410. This picture is unfortunately not a great representation. This is a lovely project. This is a great asset to our portfolio. If this were the year 15 and we were trying to acquire, I would be here jumping up and down. Yes, this is something we want. This property has had some struggles. It was put into place in a different interest rate environment, and it's really had some challenges. When the debt converted to permanent, that's when things sort of fell to the side, if you will. It's having some vacancy issues. It's 13% vacancy rate right now. There is some past due tenant receivables as well as there's aged payables. So what we're looking to do as an asset management department is to acquire this asset now instead of later, because we can make an effect change in it that we wouldn't be able to do if we allowed it to remain as a partnership asset. So one of the things that we're going to, next slide, I'm sorry. Let me back up to the AMIs. So this property does serve a high number of very affordable residents. There is a large mix of 30%, 40%. So it does serve for the deep affordability. And then there are 136 of the units that are counting as our L&T units as well. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to get back to is the asset action plan, excuse me. So we are proposing right now they have a management agent. I would like to replace that management agent out. And then also implement an aggressive marketing and leasing strategy. One of the things that we can do if we acquire the asset now is we can put in project-based vouchers. And that's going to be the key to this program, to having this property having success, because it will bring by virtue of putting the vouchers in, it brings the property up to 95% occupancy if we do nothing else. And that is great for us. And so, I know I've kind of rambled on. I wanted to give you an opportunity for questions, and if you did want to speak to Mr. Miramontes, he is here.
I just want more of a comment than a question, but what I hear you saying in your remarks is that we believe that by taking this action, we can put ourselves in a position to have more control over the management and maintenance of the property. End up in the situation where we have a project with really significant aged receivables and inability to correct those within the limits of the liquidity that we have.
Sure. And without picking on the partnership, I mean, it's sort of the comedy of everything that's gone wrong, if you will. It's really not any one specific thing. It was just, it's a deal that worked when interest rates were 3%, and it's not necessarily a deal that works right this second. And so this allows us to have the best of both worlds. It allows us to preserve an asset it's a really lovely asset. It's great for our portfolio. Again, if this was a property that we were approaching the end of the initial compliance period, I would stand up here and say, absolutely, this is what we want to take it on. It also allows us, because we would be controlling the partnership, it allows us to make the choices that we can't in its current state. And so there is language in the board docs that talks about taking on guarantees and things like that. And so I wanted to speak to that slightly. So we're writing checks either way. We're going to write the check now, or we're going to write the check later. Taking it on now has us the ability that we might probably
Minimize the amount that we have to cover.
Correct. And so it is going to give us the ability to turn the asset around slightly. It's close, but it's far away and close at the same time. And it's definitely something that we can turn around and put this into a different light. So
In a time where we get maybe receive some criticism where we're not providing some deepest affordability, this PBV option for us in these units will help us in an area of town where we've been maybe asked why we're not putting in more. And this is that opportunity. And it is right by an area that we may target later for some improvements, and this will help us with that. So
It's not a bad property. I mean, we were there for the grand opening, and
it's a great.
I know one of the problems that people talked about was parking, the way the parking was situated and everything, but I'm sure that could be resolved. But what's the occupancy rate right now?
it's right now is at 13. So there's a 13% vacancy.
Which is, compared to the overall market, this is a difficult market for multifamily properties, so.
It is in market, but the challenge, as we talked about numerous times, is that what San Antonio market occupancy is between 84 and 86%, because these projects are value engineered and they need every single dollar.
Exactly.
The occupancy at market rate doesn't cash flow the property. And so you need to be sub 94%. And when you're losing 10% of your income, and as well as the economic occupancy is different too. And so there is some receivables. There's about $55,000 in tenant receivables. And so we need to move to get those collected as well. So these properties need every dollar that they can get.
So are we taking over the management?
So it's third-party managed now. It's with a company called Willow Bridge. We have some of our assets with Willow Bridge. I would be comfortable staying with Willow Bridge, but I would request a different regional manager. The current regional manager, I don't want to speak ill of her. I disagree with her philosophy.
So we would either stay with them or get another third-party management company?
Yes.
Okay. Are we having to take on the debt that's owed?
We are taking on all liabilities.
So we're taking on everything?
Everything, yes. But by doing it now, it gives us the ability to control the situation instead of waiting 13 more years.
Okay.
Did you want to?
Would we be able to put in, like voucher units in there? Or-
So that's what we are doing. 10% is our proposal, is to put 10% of the units, that's 20 project-based vouchers into the property. And doing that alone solves the issues. That would bring this property up to the sub 95% occupancy. And so that would, if we did nothing else but put vouchers, that turns the property around.
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
Did you want to?
I should have read a little further.
You can come right over.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're gonna come to the mic, you can too.
Thank you for hearing this issue, and I appreciate your time. I just want to say a couple of things that relate to this. One, I'm very proud of the project. Me and my partner, we work on the side, on the west side. We moved to the west side recently. We believe in the neighborhood. So the goal we have is for the tenants and the residents of our neighborhood, this is our neighborhood, to do better. We can't manage it as well as you can. It's that simple. And in order for this to be the success it deserves to be, I came to the conclusion that we had to come to you because you have the resources we don't have. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about staff. I'm talking about vouchers. I'm talking about relationships. That's what this needs. And with this being a success, it furthers your strategic goals throughout the entire west side. So again, that's all I have to say, but I'm very proud of the project. We have another project just to the south at Concepcion, which won the Jack Kemp Award. So we've been striving to have deep affordability mixed with market rate. That makes it a little difficult, but it works once you have it going. So, and again, you have a staff and you have team members that are very good at what they do, and quite frankly, better than me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? No,
No, sir.
I'd like to make a comment, though. I thank you very much for your kind words about the organization, and Opportunity Home is really striving to be a partner. And I think for other entities who maybe are in not necessarily a similar situation, but who are looking for a partner to preserve deep affordability in units, that's a great position for us to be in. And as we look forward to really uncertain economic times, I think this could be a very good model for us. And I appreciate your being on the record about your desire to seek us out as a good steward of the effort that you've invested in the community.
With that, I'll make a motion that we approve 6613 to push it to the board meeting.
We have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries for Resolution 6613 to go to the board meeting.
Thank you.
Item number 8, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6609, authorizing San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to purchase the limited partner interest in ARDC Military Limited as owner of the Artisan at Mission Creek project, and to expend moving to work funds to effect such purchase and other matters in connection therewith. Miranda Castro, Chief Asset Management Officer.
So board, I had to pull this at the last minute there, so we will not be talking about this in a specific, I unfortunately have to bring this to you directly at the board meeting. Our attorneys needed to go back and revise the legal ownership structure. But if you would like, I'm happy to have the commentary now if you want me to go through the presentation, or we can leave it off the board.
Well, if it gets pulled, then we have to.
You can pull it and because you're going to do this again for the full board anyway, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay,
We'll wait till-
we'll wait till the next
Okay.
time, then we'll just table this one till the next
Okay.
board meeting, and then we can just approve it and pass it the same day.
Okay, that concludes our individual items, our discussion items. Item number 9, update and discussion regarding the Opportunity Home Program's eligibility, and Lisa Miranda Castro, Chief Asset Management Officer, Stephanie Rodriguez, Director of Assisted Housing Programs, and Ruth Bautista, Director of Public Housing.
Hello. So this presentation that Stephanie and Ruth and I are going to be doing was born out of questions about Commissioner Castillas he and I had some conversations. So we have all these vacancies at Beacon Communities, and we have all these families on the wait list. How come we can't just move those people in? And so this is an education for the board. This is an education for the community about our different books of business, if you will, so that there's an understanding of how and why things are done, and essentially so that everyone can understand the reasoning. So I'm last. I'm going to let Stephanie and Ruth do their part, and then I'll come back to speak to you about Beacon. All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Oh, okay. All right, Commissioners, as you know, and as we're well aware, public housing offers housing to low-income residents, right? And so in that, we offer their rent calculation is determined by their income. So it's an adjusted income that determines the rent calculation. An adjusted income means that our residents are eligible for allowances. It could be contributed to childcare, a disability of the head of household, minor children. That's the difference between the public housing rent calculation and then the regular private sector. The public housing assistance is reserved for just public housing, not for private rental units that are transferred to other cities. And when the based on availability and on the family size. Next slide. So across public housing, we house 6,000 individual families. So that's 6,000 individual units. And they're spread across San Antonio. So they could either occupy 59 public housing communities like Lincoln, Westway, Allison, Riverside, or they can occupy 15 communities with public housing units, which are outside managed properties. Or they can actually occupy one of our 69 single-family scattered sites. So if you notice on the map, the demographic map, it's anywhere between South 410 all the way where our properties are located. So we might ask ourselves, what is the journey from an applicant to becoming a resident? So I wanted to share and do a deep dive on each part of it. So right now, our residents are able to submit an application online. If for any reason we need to provide a reasonable accommodation that they can't submit it online, we're able to assist them to actually submit it ourselves for them, okay? After that, they are required to create an online portal, and this is where they can check for their wait list. So after they submit an application, they're submitted from the wait list. So right now, we have anywhere from a 2 to 6 year wait list for our elderly, disabled, and our family communities. Once they're pulled off the wait list, our UAC department performs a pre-eligibility screening, and we'll do a deep dive into that. Once a resident passes a pre-eligibility screening, then the applicant is moved to the eligibility appointment. And this is what happens directly at the property. After the eligibility appointment, if they meet all the criteria, they're extended a unit offer, and then they become a resident. We lease up and we move in the resident. So this is just an outline. We're going to look into it a little bit more on what the journey in the life is from an applicant to a resident. Next slide.
Ruth?
Yes.
Question.
Yes, sir.
I've heard of issues where, the unit is offered through a letter. Normally, a letter is that you have a unit that you can call us and you move forward. I've heard from some people that or sometimes the letters, you know how the mail has been lately, that the letters arrive later past they have a certain amount of time to respond. And if they don't respond, they lose the unit. I've known people that have received these letters late and have lost the unit. And then they call and they tell them what happened or whatever. They're told, well, you have to apply to be on the wait list again. So Is there something that can be done for these people? Not if they don't respond, that you call them or that we reach out to them to where they don't have to go and sit on a wait list for 5 more years after they received a unit?
That's a good question, and that's a valid concern. And so I will let Stephanie speak to that regarding our wait list, because I know that there are several avenues in which we reach out to the residents and what the responsibility is after the application is done online.
Because
Okay?
some of these have been public housing letters, but
Yes.
I'll wait for her to
Okay.
answer when it's her turn.
Oh, no, I was going to try to answer right now so we can kind of supplement. So they handed me a microphone. So with the waiting list, they do normally have been sending out notifications through mail. They did add in text messaging to residents, like you've been selected from the waiting list, you got a letter in the mail, please look out for that. They also try to do, on some of them, phone calls. But if a person comes in and normally says like, I didn't get the letter or any other information, if they were having issues with like their mailbox, if they were hospitalized for certain times, they do actually look at those individual cases. But now that they've added in those texting, it's really to make sure your information is correct on the waiting list. So they're going to be doing more maintaining of the waiting list, where they're going to try to send out notices more often that you need to keep your information updated so that you can stay in contact. So that if they do emails and text messages as well, if you don't get that mail, then there's other options that they're going to be able to contact.
Because I will say that happened to me once. So,
And before, they didn't have those as a technology option. They've been working, the waiting list has been working a whole lot with our IT department. I believe like Rave Guardian was one of them that they were exploring. And so they've been looking at a lot of different ways for technology to assist in making contact instead of just relying on mail. It was already implemented.
thank you.
May I ask a question about the wait list? The 4 public housing units, do we have separate wait lists for specific communities? Or are you able, you say, I'd like to get in line for a public housing unit, and whatever unit comes up, that's your opportunity?
So previously, we had what we called preferred developments, and on that one, you would be able to apply for an individual development. But with that, if let's say I applied for Hemisphere, which only has like 9 public housing units there and only 1, 2, or 3, I might have been on that waiting list for like that max year of 6, maybe even longer, because not many people move out. So we do currently only have 3 waiting lists. It's family, which is general occupancy, our elderly, disabled, mixed for those type of communities. And then you can also apply if you need wheelchair accessible features or accessible features in a unit like hearing impaired, you can apply for that waiting list. And then that way, if a unit comes up that has those features, they can target those specific applicants to get those filled. But we do only have the 3 now. We did a maintenance on the waiting list for those preferred developments. There are no more waiting lists for the preferred developments.
Thank you.
Commissioner, I can just add that that's the work we've been doing over the last few months, just to consolidate it and keep it really targeted and tight.
So when our residents are pulled from the wait list, there are 3 considerations that are given. The first consideration being local preference. This is actually indicated or specified by the resident at the time they make the application. So they can identify a preference such as an emergency disaster. At the time that the verification is done, the eligibility at the property, the resident or the applicant at that time is responsible for providing proof of that, that hardship or that preference. It could be, again, from American Red Cross, it could be from FEMA. And the 2 other considerations that are given is the date and time of the application that was submitted by the applicant. Next slide. So if we do a deep dive on the eligibility process for the resident, once the resident submits an application and they are drawn from the wait list, they are contacted by the UAC via letter, and they complete the pre-eligibility process. Once the applicant passes a pre-eligibility, and we'll do a deep dive on what that means, then they are transferred and eligible for an eligibility appointment. That's where the property reaches out to them and invites them to the property and says, you have passed pre-eligibility. Now we're going to do a pre-eligibility appointment. If you meet all the criteria, at that time, we will lease up and schedule a move-in. So when it comes to the pre-eligibility screening and the eligibility screening, when UAC reaches out to the resident after they've been on the wait list, UAC sends a letter and they do pre-eligibility. This is what the UAC department does on the left-hand side. We do a registered offender status, we'll check for bad debt, we'll do a criminal history, also known as a CHR. There are certain reports that we run. After they meet those criteria, then they will move to the eligibility screening. And again, that happens at the property. So when they call the applicant and they said, okay, you passed all the pre-eligibility, come on in, you've been matched to a Westway unit or the Westway property or Jewett Circle, Cisneros. At that time, the eligibility screening, the property, let's go ahead and verify your documents, your birth certificate, your social, your income, your banking statements. If there's anything that the applicant doesn't have at that time, we issue them a RAD, a request for additional documentation, and it gives them time to supply that information for their file. Once we receive all of those files, and at that time, we will extend a unit offer. So the unit may be unavailable. Sometimes the unit may be on maintenance hold. Either way, we'll make a unit offer for them or to them. So after the pre-eligibility is done and then the eligibility is done and completed, now the resident is eligible for lease up. So then that's when we schedule a move-in appointment for the resident. At the time that we schedule the move-in appointment, we may escort the resident to the unit so they can see their new home. We'll also be meeting with the resident to sign their lease. We go over the house rules. We'll go over what their responsibility is as a resident and what our responsibility is as a housing authority to them. At that time, we'll go ahead and release the unit key to them. And after that, they will recertify for income purposes every 3 years. The lease is automatic recertification or when they submit a
size of the household. So what qualifies as a household?
A house could actually be just one person, or it could be several. So right now, we have, our recent lease allows more flexibility for our residents. We used to determine as a guiding principle from HUD was that it was two per room. However, we have to take into consideration generation, the age, and so forth. So it's not uncommon, a family, it could be a husband and a wife, one bedroom. It could be a child that is 6 years old with a mother. It's not uncommon for them to be for a 2-bedroom. So the residents have more authority to say, I need a 2 or a 3-bedroom because that's what fits my family.
Could 3 unrelated people not be a household? I mean, do you have to have a consanguinity relationship? I'm just trying to understand what a household could look like.
So a house could be made up of, it doesn't matter on gender, age, race, anything, orientation, family composition. So it could be 2 men, 2 women, it could be 3 people once they sign in, once they become an applicant and they're signing in, it could be 3. They don't necessarily need to be related. They're just identified as a household.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions about our wait list or the journey of our applicants to becoming a resident in public housing? Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so she went over public housing. And so we have a very big difference on our programs. One, public housing is at communities, right, that we own, manage, partner with that are designated as public housing, while the assisted housing programs, if you go to the next slide for me, please. In general overview, it is a tenant-based rental assistance program. So this means that the assistance is tied to the person or household that's qualified for the program. And it's not tied to the apartment or unit that they live in, like public housing is. We supplement the private market for low-income families in order to help them pay rent in private landlord units. And we're also not a emergency housing assistance program or rehabilitation program for those that might be homeless. This is for if they come through the waiting list or through our partnership, if a person's eligible, we'll help them pay their rent to a landlord. We don't pay it directly to the resident. It always goes directly to the landlord. The other part to this too is that under public housing, when you get offered a unit, it's because that's our community, right? We might have a unit. Under Section 8, the resident has their choice. They go out and find where they want to go unless they applied for one of those project-based vouchers. And then that one is tied to a community, and the community would offer them the unit that they might have available. Next slide. So a little bit different on our side, right? They have 6,000 roughly for public housing. We have roughly 12,000 vouchers under our program, and that's counting regular vouchers, EHV, which is the emergency housing vouchers, which has been sunsetting, stability vouchers, foster youth and care. There's lots of different types of vouchers and not just our NTW vouchers. And then we also have our moderate rehab. So we have them spread out across the city of San Antonio and surrounding areas. We have, I believe, like some in China Grove. They're right around like a 5-mile outside 1604 is kind of like where we go. And you'll see higher concentrations in different areas on the map. But I believe this was last done this last year, and they usually review it annually to see like kind of where movement goes for those voucher holders. Next slide, please. So she went over her high level, and you're going to see most of it is the same, but there's extra on our little dots. So applications are still submitted online because our voucher waiting lists are separate from public housing. We can't select somebody from a public housing waiting list to give them a voucher. They have to come from our waiting list based on our policy. Once they're selected from the waiting list, we go through screening and verifications just like public housing does. They do pre-eligibility and then full eligibility. But then we don't do a unit offer. We issue them a voucher with an amount that they go out and search, which we talked about a little bit earlier for the small area for market rents. And then from there, the households are going to go out and search for their unit. When they find a unit, they're going to do what we call an RTA submission, which is a request for tenancy approval, because we love our acronyms. And that's where the landlord and the resident are agreeing that they would like to lease up and continue to move forward with assistance at that unit. After that, we are required to inspect the unit to make sure that it meets HUD quality standards. Some do, some don't, right, as we go through, but we give them the landlord the opportunity to make repairs, usually 21 days, in order to try to get that to that standard. And then we're also going to determine if the rent that they're requesting is reasonable. After that, unit approval, as we say, you passed inspection, we're good with the rent, and then the landlord and the resident are going to schedule that move-in. So very high level on this one, we have like 3 or 4 extra dots on ours. Next slide, Warren. So on the waiting list side, it is very different. Like they said 2 to 6 years on average for public housing. On the voucher side, we have like a 2 to 3 waiting year period because we open our waiting list only like one at a time, 15 days, and then we do a lottery. So in the 15 days, we can accept up to 15,000 applications as that part of that lottery. So if I got 20,000 applications in those 15 days, we're going to randomize them. And then in that randomized order, the first 15,000 that get selected would be the ones that get put on that waiting list. Even if you applied on the first day that it opened, you might not be a part of that lottery because it is totally randomized. And that we do have separate waiting lists for our project-based voucher because they are site-specific. We have separate ones for that. Although we are looking at combining them to be one waiting list, it's still up in the air to make it easier with the sense of, I don't know what community that is, but I do want project-based. And then our mod rehab, which is, it's not a voucher, it's more of what we call like a certificate program, and it is under that contract. We only have 2 communities left under mod rehab.
So once you're selected on the lottery, let's say there's 15,000 people that are, if you're on the lottery, you have 15,000 people, how many vouchers do you have to give out each time you run the lottery?
So it's not necessarily that we're giving out vouchers as a part of the lottery. What we're doing when we open our waiting list, the lottery is to select to be placed on the waiting list. We select people from the waiting list based on our utilization. So if we're overutilized, we don't pull anybody. If we have people leaving the program and we're underutilized, we're going to do a draw based on that utilization to get us up. So let's say we have, our goal is to hit 11,300, right? If that's our goal. And we have 11,100 people on the program and we need 200 vouchers. We might do a selection of like 500 each month in order to try to get vouchers on the street. Once we kind of get closer to those lease-up numbers, then we might slow down on that. But, because not everybody's going to either take the program, or after they've been waiting, they might not need it anymore. So we try to send out more than and then if we overlease, right, we just don't select people and we continue to serve the people. And they might, through attrition, leave the program, and we kind of stabilize that way.
What I'm trying to understand is like how many vouchers because there's a certain number that we have, right, that we can afford or pay for.
So the 15,000 is based on that 2 to 3 year wait, based on average draws that we would have. We have an attrition rate of about 75 to 100 a month under the program. Right now we're overutilized, so we haven't been selecting anybody from the waiting list. But when we get there, then we might go 100 at a time. And that's why we don't have it open right now. I think we opened it in 2023. And so then once we get closer to like only 1,000 people left, then we might open it again, depending on what we need. So it's really going to be based on our allocation, our ACC, the annual contributions contract. So we have like 12,000 vouchers, we just fill them as they leave.
And I assume we track why people can no longer utilize the voucher, and so we know how many of them have additional income and therefore they no longer qualify versus folks who move out of our service area and do we have a dashboard or do we monitor or report that to?
So for internal, we do. We normally keep track of what we call negative and positive exits is what the term
Negative and
is.
positive exits, all right.
And so we do have quite a few of positive exits. Sometimes they might buy a house. Sometimes they no longer need the assistance. Some that are not necessarily negative or positive, we call neutral, like if somebody needs to go to a full care facility and they can no longer be on their own. Or if they are non-compliant with the program. And so we want to get somebody from the waiting list that is going to be compliant with the program. And so we move through those. But we do, our policy and planning team, they're called something else now, sorry, SDI. They normally will run those reports and see what our trends are as well.
Thank you.
Commissioners, if I can just quickly add on the wait list and the length of time, 2 or 3 years sounds like a lot of time, but when you compare it to other housing authorities around the country, it's relatively quick. We just heard a few weeks ago that a voucher applicant in Chicago, a single mom, 3 kids, applied for a voucher, and she just received it a month ago, but she applied 29 years ago. So it took 29 years for her to get a voucher. We know folks in Washington.
Kids still.
The kids are adults
have
now.
kids.
Yeah.
And we know folks in Washington DC have been on the voucher list, on the wait list since the mid 1980s. So when you compare it from across the country, we are pretty quick. I think the staff and we all believe we can actually be faster than this, right? We're working on it, but just wanted to look at the comparables around the country.
And oftentimes you'll see other organizations that don't open their waiting lists for years. And when they do open it, it's like fiesta. You know, the whole community will get very excited. On ours, when the first time we reopened it, I think 2022, we didn't even hit the 15,000 applications. We were like only 11,000. This last one we opened it was a little over, I think 16 or 17,000. So we did end up using the lottery. So we do try to monitor that to see and make sure that we're keeping within that 2 to 3 year range.
And about all the people that apply for it, all of them may not qualify for the voucher.
Correct.
Also.
Sometimes when they get selected, they might be over income or they don't meet our criminal history requirements or citizenship requirements. So even though you apply, doesn't necessarily mean you get the assistance.
So we really have no way of knowing for sure that someone who's on the wait list is actually eligible for a year.
Correct. Now, part of the screening, at pre-eligibility, the same items we look at and full eligibility, but it's a little bit different on our voucher program, where when we look for look-back periods. So public housing might have 3 years or 5 years for evictions, different things like that. Our policies are set to try to be as similar as possible, but there are different regulations as well, just to kind of put that in there.
And can you be on both wait lists?
You can be on all the waiting lists available that are out there as long as they limit. So like on the public housing side, normally they have you apply for one, either family, elderly, or accessible. On our side, it's housing choice voucher, mod, and PBV. You can apply for any of those.
one more question about that. So if you're on the public housing wait list and you receive a unit and then your name comes up on the voucher, can you accept the voucher and move out of the public housing?
Yes, we have that often happen.
Thank you.
So, and it really depends also on the household, because sometimes we have households that are really more interested in the housing choice voucher, but it might have been closed. So they take the public housing, then when they're there, they really like it, and they say no, that they don't want the voucher. Some people who are on the voucher program will apply for public housing because we're the landlord. So we're a little bit more lenient. We have a little bit more care than a private landlord. And so they might move into like our senior or elderly developments.
Thank you.
2 questions. If they are on multiple lists, we still only count them once.
So when we give you waiting list numbers, we normally will give you what we call an unduplicated number. So an individual that's on the waiting list, but then when we talk about each one, we're going to say how many are in the public housing. So you will see not like if it was 40,000 on public housing and then 20,000 on Section 8, but we only have 45,000 applicants. That's where that
Because
connection is.
they can be on 2 lists, but
Yes.
the numbers that we receive, and from last I heard, it was 110,000 plus on the wait list. From what I understand, we're reviewing that and trying to get that lowered.
Right, as they go through waiting list maintenance, if you either don't make responses or you respond saying, I'm no longer interested, then they normally will whittle those down through that process.
Okay. When will we get an update on the wait list?
Commissioner, we can ask our COO
I will leave that to
who's
someone.
been here for a whopping 2 weeks.
You're supposed to be behind the tree, but.
We've actually got the updated numbers for the public housing wait list. We're waiting some responses from our mod we have, so we can give you a whole, a more accurate picture of what.
Do you think we can get that
So
next
it's
board meeting?
3:38 right now.
So, I mean, do you think we could have that by the next board meeting?
We're working on it. Our CEO is working on it, and we can tell you in fact, it's going to be lower.
Yes.
But we're making sure that these numbers are accurate, so.
Good, okay.
He's like. Also, another scenario, you have 3 adults in a household. All 3 of them applied for the voucher. Does that happen? Or, so you have 3 people looking for one place, but you have 3 names on the waiting list?
So we have had where, like, let's say if it was me and my husband and I applied, I'm the head of household, but then my husband also applied, he's the head of household, we're listed as each other's family members. That does happen. Oftentimes I might forget that I applied and I'm like, it's open, you need to apply. And so the system won't necessarily catch that until they're actually selected from the waiting list because it's all listed by head of household.
Okay. One more question, and I'm asking you because thought I was going to have to ask Ruth, but we're in a Beacon property. Several residents talked about recertification and that their data's passed by and they haven't been recertified. I think they were probably a little worried about, I'm not recertified, I lose my unit, but even though your lease ends, you still go to month until you're recertified. You're not going to lose your.
So for most leases, and especially on the public housing side, they do auto-renew either a month-to-month or 1 year, depending on what the lease explains. On the Section 8 side, it's a little different because it's a private landlord and they hold those leases. So we recertify every 3 years and we continue to pay. But the landlord might have where they have to do annual leases with that resident or have that clause of a month-to-month.
This being a Beacon property, are they under public housing?
So
Are they
there's
public
some-
housing units or are they voucher?
So there's some public housing, there's some market, and there are also some vouchers that would be here. Now, the recertification that they do here at the property, though, is more of like a tax credit a recertification, I believe. And so then that's separate from public housing's income recertification and the voucher income recertification. So somebody who's on a community that has both, like all those programs, you might have to go through 2 or 3 recertifications depending on the layering of your programs.
Okay.
So we were talking about screening. Now, part of the program requirements is that 75% of our admissions have to be extremely low-income families. So that's 30% or less of the area median income. And then the rest of the households that we screen are 50% AMI. Now, under public housing, they can go up to 80% of the AMI in order to qualify, not under the voucher program. The only time we do it is if It's like a VASH program, which specifically regulations require that, or if they're continually assisted. So if they're coming from public housing and they were at that 80% threshold and they come over to the Section 8 side, they can still qualify because they're continually assisted. Now, if they're not currently under a program and it's not that VASH program, they do have to either be 30% or 50%. We monitor monthly to see where we're at in order to make sure we meet that 75% threshold. Now, for eligibility appointments, if they pass that initial screening, the full eligibility appointment, we normally either schedule in person unless they're out of state or need a reasonable accommodation, and then we do a phone interview. We try to send the packets through online, like a DocuSign or a digital system, because we do still require a signature on our paperwork, whether it is what we call like a physical signature, or ink signature, or a digital signature. If they type their name on the packet, it's not considered a signature, just so you know. Now, even if at those appointments, if they don't have all their documents, we still also do the request for additional documentation. 10 days is what the amount of time that they're required, and we call it a RAD 10. So if anybody's ever heard that, and that's where we'll give them additional time to turn in paperwork instead of denying them. Next slide, please. So with voucher issuance, we're very different. Under public housing, they're given, this is the apartment number, this is the address, this is what we're offering you. Under our program, we give you a voucher that has initially 120 days. You're also given a shopping amount, which is what we call a unit rent estimate. This will tell the family the amount that they're allowed to search for if they have to pay utilities or if it's an all bills paid. And then it'll also list what we call a max family contribution on there. That's what the family's going to pay. And it's based on 40% of their income because they're allowed to search up to that amount until we process the account. If they find a unit that's all bills paid at that full amount that's listed on their paperwork, that is the portion they're going to pay because they found a unit that was at the very, very top of the amount allowed. If it's not an all bills paid.
So how do we handle the fact that we have 10 different groups? Do we give people a list that has 10 rent levels and a list of zip codes and?
Correct. So it's a chart that we normally give them. It'll say group 1, and then it'll list all the A, we have it in columns. It'll say, this is the rent for this area. So if you find a unit in that zip code, this is the rent if you pay utilities. In the next column, it'll say, if it's an all bills paid unit, this is the rent. You cannot afford more than that. And then the last column is always, 40% of their income won't change. So that's their max family contribution. So that'll be across the board on that grouping. So when we talk with the residents, when we issue the voucher, we explain to them it's really important that you stay within the numbers, because if you turn in a unit, let's say for 78245, and that might be, I'm just assuming group numbers right now, like group 6, but you are looking at like group 10 for your numbers, that's not going to match up and we can't take that unit. Sometimes people will still find units that are above the amount listed on there, and we'll talk with the landlord, like, can you bring it down to this amount? They really love your unit. They love your community. They love working with you. If you're willing to go down to this amount, the family can lease up with you. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Now, one thing about it's an initial phase. After that, though, if the family has not found a unit, because that's only for once. I remember earlier I talked about 6 months is the average. They can get an automatic extension of 60 days as long as they request it in writing. And usually they want to show us they've submitted some sort of proof that they've been searching. And then anytime after that, they have to have extenuating circumstances, and it would be like an additional 30 days. But that would be like if there was a medical emergency that occurred or a reasonable accommodation for a disability that they might not have been able to search as well. Any questions on that? No? Next slide, please. So now we get to the RTA and inspection process. So again, RTA is request for tenancy approval. So this would be where the landlord and the resident have agreed they found a unit. The landlord's going to start this packet online. They're going to fill in the information. It then goes to the resident for the resident to sign. And we try to reiterate to our landlords in our work groups and on the landlord corner that after the landlord signs it, they probably want to call that prospective resident to say, we filled it out. Please check your email so that you can sign the paperwork, because our office will not get it unless the resident signs it. And oftentimes we'll get a landlord call in and say, I turned in paperwork for a unit and I haven't gotten an inspection yet. And we're looking and we're like, well, we haven't gotten it. So then we will normally call the resident and say, your landlord called us, or your prospective landlord. Did you go in and sign this? And we'll try to walk them through it, because sometimes they might not know how to check their email. Once we get it, we try to schedule it within 2 to 5 business days. Our policy is 7 to 10 business days, but we try to keep it within that 2 to 5 business day range. And if everything's completed on there and everything's ready to go, then we then request for an inspection. Inspections usually will occur. So if the unit's ready, within 1 to 2 days. If the unit is not ready, and it's gonna be ready within a week, it's 7 to 10 business days. We have had some times where the unit is not going to be ready for like 2 or 3 weeks, and we will schedule that out with that landlord. But it is really based on that unit being ready. Next slide, please. So once the unit is approved, and then we always like to mention this to our residents, is that the resident and the landlord would have to coordinate a move-in because we're not the property management. We can't say when the resident can move in. The landlord would normally agree to that, but a resident can move in as soon as the unit passes inspection because that's the date that we can start a contract. If it's later, we'll start the contract based on the date that the resident moved in. But we always tell them too, if you move in before we pass inspection, unfortunately, the resident would be responsible for the full amount of rent until that unit passes inspection. So we tried to tell them not to do that. But it really depends on that resident's need, if they can afford that, maybe that prorated rent of 2 or 3 days. The landlord and Opportunity Home would then sign a housing assistance payment contract. And that's the agreement that says the landlord's going to do what they need to do to be on the program, and that we're going to pay the rent for the portion that's occurred. We will then review the account, try to process it, and we're going to send out a notice to both the landlord and the tenant. For the resident's rent portion, we call it a final rent change notice. It's going to list their portion, the contract rent, and housing payment. And if there is any type of utility reimbursement, and further utility reimbursement payment, we always like to remind families, because it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to get it as a part of the program. Usually this is the case that you might get a utility reimbursement is if you don't pay any portion of the rent and the subsidy still allows for a payment to go out of the utility allowance that's calculated. And so they might get $1, $2, $3. Some might get even up to $184, depending on their income calculation and the payment standard that's allowed for that area. Any questions related to that part?
Are the inspectors employees of Opportunity Home, or is it outside people?
So we currently do our own internal inspections team. They go through a HUD standard of inspection and get certified for the HUD standards.
Okay.
Any other questions related to the voucher program? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, so for Beacon Communities, and this a little bit also applies to partnerships because there is public housing in both our Beacon Communities and some of our partnership communities. I don't have it memorized the number off the top of my head. It's around 600 units. I can get that for you specifically. So the Beacon Communities, the real condensed answer of why we can't take people from the waiting list and put them into Beacon Communities is because people on the waiting list for both housing choice vouchers and public housing need a subsidy, and they need rent assistance because they're not able to afford even affordable market rent. And so that's the reason is Beacon doesn't have, now we do have programs, and I'm making a blanket statement, but as a general rule, we don't have subsidy within the Beacon portfolio. And so the residents wouldn't be able to pay their rent. And so that's the long and the short of why we can't take those units and cross those programs. So Beacon manages Opportunity Homes mixed income housing portfolio. They're all agency owned assets. We provide internal management services for 30 of our 35 communities. We have 6 programs that we work with. We have HUD tax credit. We work Bexar County, City of San Antonio. We do have 5 properties in third-party management right now. Next slide, please. So the Beacon portfolio right now consists of 4,962 units. Every year as assets move from the partnership portfolio into Beacon, that number will grow. Next slide. So the application and then navigating the wait list. So we don't necessarily have a wait list at our communities. It's program specific who would have a wait list and who would have an interest list. Those are two very different things. The majority of our communities, an applicant would be able to come to the community and move in. There's not a need to wait for any amount of time. Next slide, please. So the, again, the interest list, wait list. So those are our programs to the left of the slide. And then the programs that operate an actual wait list would be our LIHTC, our PBR, so our project-based rental assistance, and then our home units. So we have eight programs that of affordability that we work with in our portfolio. So 3 of them have an interest list. The rest just have a wait list. The rest have an interest list. Next slide. So we do have eligibility. We are screening for the same sort of things that we're looking at within our public housing and within our choice vouchers. We're looking for the ability to meet the income limits and then to have, we would screen out for criminal history, bad debt, citizen status, et cetera, et cetera. The income limits for our communities are on the table. There we do serve all of those AMI percentages. Next slide, please. So the eligibility requirements, so the applicants, complete a rental application. The staff verifies what's on the application, including the income and the assets. They do the rent calculations, ensure that they are in compliance with the programs. Then compliance does a spot check of the program just to make sure that we got all of everybody's math worked, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. And then the applicants will be informed that they are approved, a move-in date will be set, and then the unit is inspected to confirm readiness, and then the property prepares the lease and the lease is executed. Next slide. Any questions?
Leila? Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the 3 of you. All that came from one question I asked?
That's. And we all got to listen to it.
Item number 10, discussion regarding the proposed 2025 board meetings calendar. Muriel Roeder, Executive Vice President and Chief Admin Officer. You finally get to stretch your legs.
I know, I'm excited. Okay, so this is the time of the year we bring forward our proposed board calendar for the following year. And so with our calendar, as you recall, we typically have our board meetings on the first Wednesdays of the month. And then we have our committee meetings on the third Wednesdays of the month. So our board proposed calendar is set up that way, except we have a few changes, as we typically do because of things that have come up that we've identified in advance.
Meetings, conferences.
So for the month of January, what we typically do is if we're able to move the everyone an additional week break. So in this case, our committee meeting will be on January 22nd, which is a Wednesday, and that'll be our first operations meeting. Then February, we'll have our normal first Wednesday board meeting, and then third Wednesday, finance and operating committee meeting. In March, we're going to move things a little bit because the first Wednesday of the month is going to coincide with not only Ash Wednesday, but the SA to DC trip, which I know staff and commissioners normally go to. The reason why we're not moving that to the following week, which is sometimes what we do, is because NARA Washington conference is that following week as well. And so what our proposal is that we will do the board meeting for March on Thursday, March 6th. Now, I know SA to DC is the 3rd through the 6th. However, Marissa did check, and the 6th is a travel day. So that means that what we're requesting is anyone that plans to go, take the earliest flight back that morning possible so that they can get there in time for the board meeting at 1 p.m.
We'll be back early that morning.
So then the 19th is normally when we would do the committee meeting for March. However, that's CLAFA. So CLAFA starts on the 20th, March 6th. So CLAFA is the 20th and the 21st. So that makes the 19th the travel day. So what we're wanting to do 18th, which is a Tuesday. So it'll be a little bit. Then April, Monday, the 3rd, first Wednesday and the 3rd Wednesday. May, they will also be as planned, the first Wednesday and the 3rd Wednesday. June, we only have the board meeting, so that's still planned for the first Wednesday. So July, typically for July, we kind of do it, we try to do it like we do for January, and if we can push it to be more to 2 weeks before the August board meeting, we try to do that. However, the TAAHP conference is that. And so what we're doing is actually moving it to the 3rd week. So the 3rd week in July, that Wednesday, the 3rd Wednesday in July is when we're planning to have that particular meeting. Then the first week in August will be our normal August meetings. And then for September, it'll be the 1st and then the 3rd week. And then in October, the board meeting, we'll schedule it for the first Wednesday. However, for the committee meetings, we need to move it back. October has 5 being the 3rd Wednesday. We're requesting it to be the 4th Wednesdays because of the Jewish holidays that are in there where no work is allowed. And so that from doing the normal 3rd Wednesday. So we'll move it to the 4th Wednesday, but that still gives us 2 Wednesdays before the November board meeting. And then the November board meeting and the November committee meeting will be 1st and the 3rd Wednesdays. And then the December board meeting will be the 1st Wednesday. So that is our proposal. Try to do as best as we can is to take into account all of the conferences we're aware of, all of the holidays that we're aware of, so in travel schedules. So, and get this information to you and able to get it onto your calendars. Any questions, any concerns about our proposed calendar?
No, ma'am.
Y'all will send them out just like.
Yes, we will. And what we'll do is as soon as you say, I'll have Marissa put these on your calendar. Any?
I was gonna say, yes, put them on a calendar. This much notice, it's usually okay, as long as we're avoiding things that y'all already know about.
Yes, everything that has been published, that we know about, we have taken into consideration. That doesn't mean something come up.
Yeah.
But we'll adjust as necessary. But this at least gives us an opportunity to put this on your calendars, especially for those slight tweaks and dates that we have, so that you have as much advance notice as possible.
Phone calls, can y'all just write in the memo when we, due to CLAFA, due to SADD, the change?
Okay, so Marissa.
Okay. It'll just save me from calling. Why are we moving this again? And they're like,
Yeah.
you said to move it. So
Yeah.
get between now and then.
And we'll share this, well, actually, she should have access, but
Yeah.
we'll share this calendar with her. That way she knows why we've moved it and what caused the movement, so that when we do have those changes, she'll be able to let you know why we did the change from the normal day.
There's FATA conferences that still haven't been mentioned, so they could be.
Actually, the FATA conference, the annual FATA conference, it's at the end of May.
Oh, okay.
So it's at so last year it was in June, which caused us to move our data committee meeting and our board meeting.
Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, well, I'll have Marissa put these on your calendar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, question, Mr. President?
We're good. Thank you. Nope, we're good.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Do I hear a second?
You got it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned at 4:02 PM.
Thank you, residents, for being here today.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Thank all your residents for being here and being attentive. Remember that your staff is here for you. If you have any concerns or anything, please see your management or your staff here. Also, to the staff members of the property, management staff, thank you so much for all that you do to facilitate this meeting for us. Thank you.
I'm just looking to see where we are with